Good morning, class. We are back with some more poetry today. Last poem that we'll read this week because tomorrow you will be having your photography lesson with Mrs. Sweeney. Again, this is just a jam-packed week with all sorts of fun things. Earlier you had your lesson with Mrs. G, and you should be having your assignment turned in by now, by the way. But with Mrs. G, you learned the two different types, the two main families of poetry, and that is the ballads and the lyric poetry. So the lyric poetry we learned meant that it was reflecting on usually a person or an item, even a place maybe, and the poet is trying to come up with some insight about that specific thing. We learned that originally in ancient Greece that it was played with a lyre, which was like a harp type instrument, and that's where the name lyric comes from. So even when you're talking about the lyrics to a song, that's where it comes from. Um, and then we have the ballads, which are about a story within the poem. So the poem itself is not just focusing on one person, place, or thing, but it's telling you the whole narrative about some important event. Now, we move on today to Ozymandias or Ozymandias, which is a great big name. You can just refer to it as Ozzy if you'd like, by Percy Bysshe Shelley in 1818. Percy Bysshe Shelley was married to Mary Shelley, who was the author of Frankenstein in 1818. That's where we get all of the wonderful stories about zombies and how they're such a main a main feature of today's entertainment, which is very strange to me. But if you want to read her lovely text on Dr. Frankenstein, perhaps you should check that out. You might have to do that in high school. Romanticism, as we talked about with Wordsworth just a few days ago, was often wrapped up in poetry. We studied Wordsworth, now we're studying Shelley, who were both romantic poets. And there's not as many novels that have to do with romanticism, but Frankenstein is one of them. So if you are enjoying this stuff that we're studying now, go check that out. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we got Ozzy in front of us with Shelley's poem in 1818. Now, the Wordsworth poem was 10 years before this, so this is kind of the second generation of Romantic poets. They still take on a lot of the same characteristics. This one isn't so much about nature, but it is very critical of the opposite of nature, which is cities and civilization and all of that. So in that sense, it is very much related to the earlier Romantic poets and their criticisms of how we've gotten too built up in buying and selling stuff and living in urban communities. Maybe we have to remember that nature is where we can find some peace, and some wholeness. And that's where all of the romantics are going eventually to point you to. Now, I'm going to read through this once, and then we're going to talk about it so that we can get all that hard vocab out of the way and all of the nice poetic devices. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing besides remains. Round the decay of the colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Oh, yeah, that poem is heavy and it's worth reading. So now that we've read it, let's hop in there and let's try to figure out what this poet is doing and why as I said, this is a heavy poem and why people would be talking about it in the first place. I met a traveler from an antique land. Antique, have you been in an antique store before? I'm guessing you have, maybe with your grandma or your grandpa, and they said, look at all this wonderful stuff. And you said, it's all old and rusty, and why would people even buy this? That's an antique store. Antique does mean old, but it specifically means the time period that came before the Dark Ages. And that probably doesn't mean much to you, but think of our past books that we read. We read Homer and Homer's Iliad. The Iliad took place in the antique time, the ancient time. And so does the Bible. The Bible takes place in the ancient times. And when you think of some books in the Bible, like really central to the story of the Bible, like the Exodus, it took place in Egypt, and how Moses was leading the Israelites to the land of Canaan. He led them out of Egypt. That's what you call an exodus, when everybody's exiting, and then they move on into the Holy Land. So that's the kind of the time period, and there is some strong speculation that this person, Ozymandias, was actually the Pharaoh that the Jews, not the Jews, but the Israelites at that time had left, that they had departed from him. So the Pharaoh of your Bible could be this Ozymandias. We don't know exactly which Pharaoh it was, because the story in the Bible is very intentionally not giving you the name of the Pharaoh. The story gives you the name of Yahweh, their God, and Moses, and all of these characters, but not the Egyptian Pharaoh. But this is obviously not a biblical text. This is Ozymandias, and it's Shelley's poem. And in this story, this character gets a name, and this was at least one of the pharaohs we know in history, not just in this made-up world. This is not a made-up poem. This is a story about a real statue. Let's move on. Line 2. This traveler said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Now, what's interesting about this is that your first line gives you the poet speaking, I met a traveler. But then the poet goes completely away. It's just, he's not in the poem after that. It's all about this traveler, don't know if it's a guy or girl, who starts going off about what he saw in the desert. And you might be wondering, if the poet's not even going to have a voice in this, why is he included? Why didn't we just start with the traveler saw two vast and trunkless legs? This is actually a technique. It's a little trick that poets like to do, and it kind of separates themselves from the controversy. So you could think of this as like in the beginning of Star Wars. Right? And in the beginning of Star Wars, it says, long ago in a galaxy far, far away. Doo, 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 right? And then it has the scroll, and you're in this whole new world, and you're not even supposed to really connect it to your own until you might automatically make those connections, right? In the same way, Shelley is saying, I heard this guy once say this about something he saw on a trip. And in doing so, he puts up this wall, and he can't be blamed for any misinformation, right? If this poem is, if it makes you feel uncomfortable about your own kind of limitations, then Shelley says, look, it's not me, it's what that guy said. So that's what you call a framed text or a framed poem. It's where you put it off in the far distant in somebody else's mouth. Wasn't me, that guy. So let's move on. What did he see there? Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Trunkless legs. Usually legs lead to a body, right? The trunk of the person. Well, these are trunkless. They're just some sticks. You can really see a picture of this, actually. It's a real thing. trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage. Now that's a new word. Visage, face. This is a visage. This is a visage. Whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. Pause there. Sneer. What is a sneer? It's not just a frown. We have the frown before that in the line above, and then you get this sneer. Now a sneer is like a smile of contempt, a smile of looking down on someone, and not a sincere smile. So when you are feeling like you are all that, you are better than someone else, then you put a sneer on your face. And if you try to sneer, it's not that easy. try to give someone an insincere smile and just kind of make sure they understand that you are all that. That's kind of what a sneer is, a smile of contempt, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, power, cold command, tell that its sculptor well those passions read. Now, the order of words in this sentence is a little confusing. I'll give you that. Well those passions read, that means that the artist who made this giant sculpture that we're seeing in the desert here, they did a really good job of interpreting that person's face when they were carving out their sculpture. He read those passions well. Tell that its sculptor well read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. Okay. In a way, this character, this pharaoh who had all this power, survives, but only on these dead stones. Now he's only this sculpture. The body of this pharaoh is gone. This is what's left. Whatever the sculptor made, that's all that we have. So this is you could call this a paradox. It's something that it's both true but doesn't really make sense at the same time. How can someone be alive if they're already dead? Well, they can live on through their artwork in a way, but it's not what it used to be, right? So that's what they're meaning when they say how he's still surviving, stamped on lifeless things. The hand that mocked them. The hand, so the sculpture's hand that mocked them, that mimicked, that's what mock can mean, mimicked the real person that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. So this is a little pedestal, a little plaque, a little place to put some words about the sculpture. What did it say? My name is Ozymandias, King of kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless the bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So the part that is on the plaque there, I'll repeat it one more time. My name is Ozymandias, King of kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. What does he mean? In some sense, it's straightforward. I'm the best, right? I'm the strongest. You can't even mess with me. Look at this sculpture. I am amazing. But does he say, look at this sculpture? In a sense, we can imply that that's what's supposed to be going on, because after all, this message is right below his sculpture. But what does the text say? Look on my works. My works? Well, he didn't sculpt himself, so he must be referring to something else. What did pharaohs do? They built a whole lot of stuff, especially this guy, Ozymandias, because he built entire cities. He built pyramids. He built big tombs, which those are what pyramids are. But the idea is that he led this great civilization that it could not be matched by anyone around him, that he had this entire army behind him, that he had conquered the world, right? Yes, that's what he's saying. King of kings, there's nobody above me. King of kings, where else have you seen that phrase? Yeah, you've heard that in the Old Testament to describe the God that we worship, right? Yahweh, or God, or however you want, whichever name you want to choose, that's used in the Old Testament. But that God, yes, we call him the King of Kings, and in the New as well. Look on my works, you mighty ones, you mighty people. Despair. What an inviting guy. Here, everybody look at me, even you strong ones. Take a glimpse at what I've done and lose all your hope. Be afraid. Despair. That's what despair is, a loss of hope. Um, and then there's two little lines that Percy Bysshe Shelley wants you to be left with after reading that terrifying threat. Nothing, oh, I guess there's three, I'm sorry. Nothing beside remains. Nothing. The whole city that he was boasting about, it's gone. It's not there. It's just sand. It's just sand. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, capitalized. Ooh, man, he really drives the point home by capitalizing that. This beautiful statue, yeah, Shelley calls it a wreck. And boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. I keep looking, but I can't see anything that you built, Mr. Ozymandias. Where is all your temples now? Where are all of your cities to be afraid of? Where are all your armies that are chasing me down? Um, where is the backbone of what you just said? Where is the power to back it up? Shelley's making a point here. Whatever little kingdom you've built, it's not going to last. And there will come a time when all of the most serious boasts, the most serious threats, and the most serious even victories will be laughable because history does not hold on to anybody's claim to fame. So who are you living for? Let's make it practical now before I lose you off of the video here, which I see a lot of you guys are not watching the full video. Come on, guys, let's go. We got poetry to study. Think about in your own case. We have picture day, right? We have picture day where you have to take a picture and it goes in the yearbook and then everybody can see you. Do you smile for that picture? Do you turn a certain direction for that picture? You can't really choose to wear something else because we have our regulations at Chapel Hill. When you're a senior in high school, you'll get to choose what you want to wear. Do pictures mean something to you? Maybe they don't. Maybe you say, I don't really care. I don't even remember when we had our picture day. But pictures might be something that you put a little thought into because you care about what people are going to see you as. Now, maybe you say, well, school pictures don't matter, but let's go to your phone then, your social media, all of the pictures that you take on Snapchat or that you post on Instagram. I think that's still a popular way. What makes the cut on your Instagram page? And why is it those pictures? What is it that drives you deciding one way of being seen and perceived is better than another? What is the message that you want to go out to the world. Why do you want to put your face on the internet? Yeah, I mean, you have to ask yourself these questions. What's the benefit? What are we trying to prove when we put images of ourselves on the internet? What is this king, Ozymandias, trying to prove by putting his face all over the world and saying, "Fear me, I'm the best"? Why does this boast mean something? Or does it mean anything? Why do we need to put our pictures online to build our reputations about how we feel about ourselves? Um, so these are all questions. And as you can see, this might get a little uncomfortable when you start to think about it in our everyday lives. Why are we always trying to advertise ourselves? And that might be why Shelley wanted to frame this poem by saying, oh, it was my friend who said that. And it was about some guy that lived way long ago. And it has no relevance for us today, right? Except it does. And that's why it's important to read about. Um, yeah, who are you living for? What image are you trying to put forth? Are you trying to put forth your own image, or are you trying to bear an image? Bear whose image do you think I'm talking about? Genesis 1, bearing the image of God. Man and woman were created in the image of God at the beginning of the Bible, in the beginning of Genesis. We were not made to present our own image. We were not made to make our own name famous. We were made to bear the image of our Creator, to bear the name of God in in how we live our lives. It's not about building your own kingdom. All right. I'm going to give you a question to reflect on that, and I hope you come back um, time after time to Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Okay. Bye, you all.